Hello, everyone. My name is Trent, and I'm a technical consultant and developer at Cigital. Cigital is a ServiceNow partner and consulting agency whose mission it is to digitally transform the workforce. We're well aware that in today's digital world, every organization must not only have a strong foundation, but the ability to adapt quickly to changing technologies, processes, and business requirements. Cigital has extensive consulting and implementation experience and a passion for helping organizations achieve their goals through the power of ServiceNow. So, if you or your organization are in need of technical consultation, managed services, or even product implementation, head over to thinkdigital.com to reach out to our team. Would love to help you achieve your goals through the power of ServiceNow. So, with that out of the way, today we're going to be talking about one of the most powerful automation tools that ServiceNow has, Flow Designer. Specifically, we're going to talk through how we can design flows that are dynamic, reusable, and help reduce the overall development burden of catalog item administration. If any of you are developers and have worked with catalog items in the past, you know there are some funny little quirks with the way that variables work or don't work in some cases. So this is going to be a multi-part series kind of showing the setup, creation, and optimization of these flows and subflows. This demo does kind of assume that you have a bit of working knowledge about ServiceNow, but I'm going to try to talk through each step as I get through it. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk through what we're going to fix. I'm going to head over to my PDI. PDI is a personal development instance. This is pretty much a brand new, fresh instance. The only thing that I have done is I've set up a couple of catalog items already. So I have a couple of demo catalog items. I just call them typical catalog item. I think it's kind of funny. And then I also have set them up as quick links on my employee center. So I have typical catalog item 1 and typical catalog item 2. They do look fairly similar. They even share a variable set up here. So we just have, request type, completion date, applications that points to the app table, and then a couple of multi-line text boxes here. And then for the second one, we have very similar things, but we have a reference to the location table, as well as a list collecting reference to the user table. Behind the scenes, the flows on these aren't really that impactful. I'll show them to you real quick. And they're the exact same, so I'm just going to show through one. So our flow, all it really does is ask for approval from the requested for users manager. Assuming that they don't reject it, which we hope, but assuming that they don't reject it, then all we do is create a catalog task. We do one thing here that I kind of want to point out because it will be key to some of our dynamicism going forward, is the assignment group is not hard-coded, it's not set within the flow itself, it can actually change. It is based off of the fulfillment group, which, if you didn't know, in a catalog item, there is a completely out-of-the-box field called fulfillment group. So that fulfillment group is just a pointer, a reference to the sysuser group table or the assignment group table. So you can pick any group you want here. So our flows are just kind of picking up on that. We can change it at the catalog item level, and the flow will automatically change without having to update the flow. That's nice, but it's not really the level of dynamicism that we want. And I'll show you what we mean by that. So I'm going to go ahead and submit one of these. Let's just do the first one for sake of doing so. I'm going to just make some selections here. Nothing that truly matters right now in terms of selections. If I submit this, and I get our RITM number, our requested item number. So if I go to the requested item, we can see the flow is working as we would expect. It creates a fulfillment of typical catalog item type of task here. It does not actually approve because I forgot and submitted this for myself as the system administrator, which does not have a manager, so the approval gets skipped in that case. But, so the task looks kind of as you would expect. Some of you are probably asking why the variables are read-only. There's a script on the back end for each of these catalog items that makes it so all the variables are read-only. I just did that so that we don't accidentally mess with them. It's not really important for the sake of this demo. But you can see that all the variables transferred across. Cool. Great. Awesome. Now, one of the tiny things that becomes rather annoying the more that you work with catalog items and the more catalog items that you work with and the more flows that you work with is adding a new variable. It's really easy to go add a new variable. We're just going to do, let's see, order 800 here. We're just going to call this a test variable. Mandatory, just so we have to fill something in. And easy peasy. On the front end, we've got our test variable. So no big deal there. That works fine. We'll go ahead and submit another one of these. And those of you who have been annoyed by this probably already know where this is going. But I'm going to submit this. Go ahead and get my RITM number as well. And go take a look at that. Now the RITM, the requested item here, is going to look perfectly fine. We have our test variable. That's awesome. There's a formatter that automatically pulls in the variables associated with that item. The problem comes from our catalog task. So our catalog task, we go and look at it, we don't have our test variable. And the reason for that is built into this flow. So I'll have to refresh this in just a moment to kind of show you, or not, actually, it's right there. So you'll see that we have available and selected in terms of variables. So we could potentially use all the variables, which I am in this case, but test variable, since it's new, we haven't selected it. That means that to add it, I'm going to have to go select it. I'm going to have to save my flow, and then I'm also going to have to activate my flow. And yes, you can activate and save in the same button. It's habit. So now if we go back and submit this, again, none of these particularly matter right now. It's kind of just for demonstration purposes. But now if we submit this, we should be good. We should have a catalog task and a RITM that both show our test variable and the RITM, we expect that. And then the catalog task itself, test variable. Great. Now, let's say that you are modifying 30, 40, 50, 100 different catalog items, and each of them have their own flow. So you'll see that behind the scenes, each of my catalog items has their own flow. I can actually go and show you on the cat items themselves. So typical cat item demo has its own flow, number 2 has its own flow, and they're very, very similar. Really, the only big differences between them is the variable selection here. Cat item 1 and 2 do not have the same variables, so I can't use the exact same flow. It's not going to pull the variables from that template. That's what we're going to fix today. That's what I'm going to show you how to we'll work through a series of flows and subflows to make that dynamic, make it pull in variables regardless of the catalog item that you send at it. So we're going to create a standard catalog item flow. So let's do that. So standard catalog item flow. And just so that I keep my same filtering here, I'm going to add demo to the end of it. Now, we know that this is going to get triggered by a service catalog. And I like to go ahead and set up my flow stages pretty early on. So I'm going to add stages. We're going to do one that doesn't require approvals first, and then we'll kind of jump into an approval one once we have all of the guts of this one built out. So we're just going to need a fulfillment and a completed step. Everything else can kind of go for right now. So we can't really do much with this because the very first task here is to create a catalog task. And if we do it the same way that we've always done it, then we haven't moved ourselves forward in any way, shape, or form. So I'm actually going to want to create a subflow here. So I'm going to create a subflow. And I'm just going to call this create catalog task with variables. So I'm going to add an annotation. I always kind of like to add a subflow annotation just in case somebody uses this in their own flow, they know what it does. So accepts inputs for catalog item creation and has some defaults just in case. Maybe not the best description, but we'll roll with it. So the very first thing that we obviously are going to need is a reference to that written record. We've got to pass the written record in, otherwise we don't really know what we're attaching anything to. So I'm going to set up a quick input for this subflow, make it mandatory, because we kind of have to have that. And that's our bare bones. But what are some of the other common fields on catalog tasks? Let's go take a look at them. If I look back in my history, I can kind of bounce to one of our catalog tasks. The common ones that we see are short description, description, maybe assignment group as well, potentially even state priority. We're going to keep it pretty simple for right now and just go with some of the bare bones. So we're going to make some optional items here. We're going to say short description. We're going to say long description or just description. And then let's make this a multiple line text area. Let's do assignment group. And that's probably good enough for now. Now, once we create a catalog task here, we're going to want potentially want to be able to do something with it inside of our main flow, right? So let's do this. We can set a output to catalog task record. And then we'll just set this to a reference of SC task. That way, when we set the subflow output later, we're good. Now, I'm going to be writing a lot of little annotations here. Hopefully it helps you all. If not, I'm sorry. But I'm hoping that by doing so, it helps kind of explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So the first thing that we want to check is we want to see is short description empty, or is description empty, or is assignment group empty? And I'm going to set up a couple of flow variables for this as well. So I'm going to set up our default short description. I'm going to set up our default description. Let's see, I think that was just a string as well. I can't make it a multi-line string, that's okay. And then I'm going to put our default assignment group. And then this one is going to be a reference to the sysuser group table. So what we're going to do is we're going to do if description is empty. We'll check our inputs and see, is this empty? If so, then we're just going to go ahead and set a short description. And actually, sorry, I missed a step. Let's do this. So we're going to set some defaults. Set the default flow variables to match our inputs. And this is so that we can check against those flow variables just to see. So default short description, description, and our assignment group. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and grab my data pills over here and grab this short description, drop it in there, my description, drop it in here, and then the assignment group, drop it in there. So we're just kind of initializing these flow variables with whatever we're pulling in. And then we'll change this actually to look at our flow variable. Is this short description empty? If so, then we're going to set the short description flow variable to our defaults. And kind of what I always use for defaults in this case is something just like fulfillment of whatever the catalog item name is. It doesn't have to be fancy, but that's what I typically do. So we'll base it off of fulfillment of, and then we need to get the item. So we'll do some dot walk in here. So from the rhythm, we can get over to the item itself and then to the name of that item. pull that in. So fulfillment of, in this case, it would be typical catalog item. Not very fancy in this case, but still usable. And then we're going to do the same thing for if description is empty. Flow variables, description is empty. If so, we're going to set. We're going to set this description to what we want it to be. Now, in my case, I don't really care to have a default description, but we're going to just so we have it. So we're just going to say default description. Just so that there's something in there. So that way we'll be able to tell if it is the default or if something has been passed in. All right. And let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to do our last check here for assignment group is empty. Now this one's a little bit different. Instead of checking for the reference itself, we're going to actually check for the sysid of that reference. So if the sysid is nothing, essentially, we know that we don't have an assignment group. References can be a little bit weird when you're passing them into subflows, so I always like to do the sysid check rather than the reference record itself. So again, we're just going to set our own kind of thing here. So we will set flow variable, the assignment group, and this, we want to use that fulfillment group. Yeah, we could go and just hard code and pick, but if we're wanting to make this dynamic, use it for multiple catalog items, potentially dozens or hundreds of catalog items. We don't want to hard code something here because it's going to impact all of them. So we're going to take a look at that rhythm record, go over to the item, and then go over to the fulfillment group. So we're going to use that fulfillment group. That'll be our default record. So default the assignment group to the fulfillment group of the catalog item. Now, this will fail. Well, it won't fail, but it just won't actually put anything in the assignment group if on the catalog item itself, you don't fill in a fulfillment group. So if we aren't using this fulfillment group and you're using something else, you may want to change that to point to something that's a little bit more relevant in your scenario. But fulfillment group I found is pretty good. Most clients I've run across don't really use it because it's a bit of an older field. It's not even on the form anymore by default. So let's go ahead and save this, make sure we don't lose our work. And then we're going to actually use the create catalog task. So we're going to use ServiceNow's own create catalog task. We're going to give it the rhythm record. The short description we are going to pull in from our flow variables. We're going to give it a description from our flow variables. And then we are going to give it an assignment group from our flow variables. There we go. Something you probably want to do, and we'll do a little bit of enhancement on this later, but you probably want to uncheck this wait because it will hold up your subflow. Now, if you're wanting to run this and then do something, potentially wait inside of your primary flow, that's where you want to make sure. So let me add an annotation here. Let's see, create a catalog task using the inputs or defaults if inputs were not provided. Now, I'm going to go ahead and publish this. I know there are some savvy developers right now who are looking at this and saying, you're not really solving our variable problem. And that's true yet. But I kind of want to get our base structure built out. and then I'll show you how we're going to solve that. So I'm going to call a subflow, create catalog task with variables, and right now it's not creating variables. So this asks for our rhythm record. Since we are in the primary flow, we're just going to pass it our kind of top level rhythm record. If we want to pass in short description, or assignment group, we absolutely can. This is how we make this reusable, not only for our standard item, but also for items in the future. So anything that's not necessarily a standard catalog item flow, but we still want the robustness and the variable creation of this catalog task. This is where we can do that. That's how we make it dynamic. All right, let me save this. And now we need one more thing here. I'm going to go ahead and add this fulfillment stage. And then at the very end, I always add a wait. Unfortunately, it's kind of an arbitrary wait to allow for stage transition. It won't do it if you just have a stage transition right there at the end of the flow, sadly. Tried it, tested it many times, and it just will not work for me. So if we're not waiting on the catalog task, right, we unchecked that in here. We said, nope, we're not waiting on the catalog task. Our flow, as is right now, if we were to run it, is literally just going to create that task and then close our rhythm, which is not what we want. We probably want to wait on all the tasks to actually be complete. So right now, that's what we do here in our typical catalog item flow. We wait. So we know 100% that we wait on this to be complete or incomplete or canceled, and then we complete the flow after that. But we don't have that same kind of opportunity here. So we've got to make our own. Now, one thing that we're going to build out here is another subflow that is going to wait for all catalog tasks to complete. Now, when I say all, I really mean all, because what we're going to do is do essentially a while loop while any catalog task that has that parent of that rhythm, we're going to wait on it until those are all inactive. And what that does for us, what kind of benefit we get out of that, as opposed to this typical catalog item flow here, is we actually account for ad hoc tasks. If we were to add an ad hoc task to this flow right now, to this rhythm, then the flow wouldn't care about it. It wouldn't even know about it. So we would have no way to trigger action or inaction off of that task in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to, and before I forget, let me go add my little demo suffix here. I want to make sure I can find these pretty easily. And then I'm going to go create another subflow. So I'm going to create a subflow, and I'm going to call it wait for all catalog tasks to complete. And I'm going to add myself an annotation down here. It's for all catalog tasks associated with a rhythm to complete, even ad hoc tasks, or proceeding. So how we do that, we definitely need our rhythm because otherwise we have no reference, right? So we need our rhythm record as an input. We'll give that reference again. Oops, okay. So we'll give that reference again, make that mandatory. If we don't have it, we can't really do this logic. I'm gonna go ahead and add my demo tag to this. And then we're gonna do the following until. So this may not make sense at first, but it will momentarily. We're actually gonna skip the condition until just a few minutes down the road. So we're gonna look up records. And what we want to do is we want to look up the catalog task records. So we want only active records. We only really care about the active ones. If they're inactive, we don't really need to wait on them to close, right? And then we also want for the parent of that And I kind of like going into sysid again because I don't 100% trust reference records. So the parent sysid, we want that to match the input rhythm, the sysid of that. This is how we know that our catalog task is truly linked to that rhythm. And then we can just sort this by number. Not that it truly matters, but just kind of a preference of mine. All right. Look up all catalog task records that are active and associated with the input rhythm record. So now we can actually kind of go back to our condition, because what we want to do is essentially bail out of this if there are no active tasks. And how we can do that is go into the lookup record and do count, and then we can say if count is 0. So if there are 0 records, then we know we've gotten to where we need to, and we can bail out of this subflow safely. So with that, I'm going to say if active tasks exist, and use that same count, I'm going to do a greater than 0. All we really have to do here is do a for each. And we're going to loop through all of those records that we found, catalog task records. And then we are going to wait for condition. Now, this little action here is really nice. It lets you essentially, it does what it says on the 10. It waits for a condition, right? So we're going to pass in the catalog task record on a per loop basis. And we want the active flag on this to be false. So we're going to wait for catalog task to be marked as inactive. So that's either complete, incomplete, canceled, etc. Any of those states, really. And we're pretty much done here. So what this is going to do, just to kind of step through it one more time, we're going to accept the rhythm, and we're going to loop, or continue to loop. We're going to look for all catalog tasks that are active and have the same parent as that rhythm. And I can show you here. Let me go to the SC task table. Kind of show you what I'm talking about with that parent. So you see here where it is requested item. So that is requested item. So actually I made a mistake. Let's go fix that real quick. So the parent rhythm, it's not really the parent in this case. It is the request item. So yeah, let me go fix that. Glad we caught that. All right. We're going to do request item. Same deal though. sysid. And then we're going to make sure that it is the rhythm sysid. Right. And publish. So stepping through that, essentially we're just waiting for each of those tasks to complete, and then we're good to go. That's why we don't, in our create catalog tasks with variables, that's why we don't wait here. One thing we want to go ahead and do, now that that's published, is we want to add it to our flow. So wait for all catalog tasks to complete, and then we will give it our rhythm record. And that's pretty much it. Like that's the standard catalog item flow. I'm going to go ahead and switch this out so that we can see some things and try it against one of our catalog items. So I'm going to do catalog item number 2 here. And then I'm going to switch this up and say, I want the standard catalog item flow. Save. Let's go request that now. So if I request it, I'm going to do an addition. I'm going to do a few days from now, sometime next week, pick a location. pick my good friend Abraham Lincoln here and go ahead and request. So let's go take a look at that rhythm and see what it did. So again, we have all of our kind of expected variables, good deal. And we do have an SC task record. We can see it is assigned to the field services group, which is good because we'll take a look at our demo item here. So cat item 2, the fulfillment group that I have set is field services, so that's good. It picked that up appropriately. And then, oh man, here's the problem, right? We have no variables. That's okay, I kind of expected it to happen. What we're going to do is run through a way to make variable addition dynamic. So we need kind of one more item in here, one more piece of the puzzle. But let's go ahead and mark this as closed. And then we'll go back and make sure that that closed how we wanted it to. So we marked this as closed complete. We're good there, and we can see that the rhythm itself actually did go to the completed stage, closed complete. So the flow worked how we would want it. And just to kind of show you the flow context, for those of you who don't know, you can go look at the flow context to see how a flow ran. Well, not in this case because I did not turn on the flow. Let me do that real quick. I can do flow reporting. I'm going to turn on flow reporting just in case we want to look at it in the future, because we probably will. So the last piece of the puzzle there that we really need is adding those variables dynamically. So that is yet another subflow. And that's going to be attached to this create catalog task here. So after we create the task, another reason to not do the wait here, we want to create a subflow. And I'm just going to call this one attach variables to catalog task. I'm going to say this accepts a catalog task input and automatically adds all available variables to the SC task record. Almost sounds too good to be true, but it's not. So same thing here. We do need an input, right? We're going to need the SC task record in this particular case to know what we're attaching to. And that's another reference to the SC task. Again, mandatory. Go ahead and add my demo tag to this. And now we're going to do a couple of things that people may not have ever seen before, but that's okay. We are going to take a look at a get catalog item from task action. So get catalog item from task. So really what we're doing here is we're pulling from the task record, and we're going to pass in a rhythm record here, right? We're going to dot walk to get the rhythm record from our input task record. But we're going to pull in all the variables, make sure we actually know what those are. So gather the variables from the rhythm record. So let's dot walk a little bit. From our SC task, we want the requested item, or the request item. That is our rhythm record. And then what we're going to do here is we need to do a lookup. So we're actually going to look up some variables here. So look up records. And the table that we're hitting against is going to be the item option new table. So this is going to look a little funny for people who haven't done it before. But what we want to do in this particular case is we want to actually script the criteria because there are some APIs behind the scenes that we want to use. So let's just go ahead and annotate this real quick. We want to look up all variables and variable sets attached to the rhythm. We can do this because when we saw earlier, these variables automatically get attached at the rhythm level. So we can use that to our advantage and use a script to grab them. Let me clean out all the stuff here. So we're going to do we want to get the item ID, and we can get into our FD data, catalog item, and then item ID. This is essentially using scripting to pull what you can see over here as the item ID. It's just a string from that get catalog item from task. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start a query, and we're going to say that we want the cat item equals, and then that item ID. So this is how we start, but we need to go ahead and look and see if the item ID exists. Item ID. And this is a part where I don't know if everybody's going to necessarily follow, so I'm going to add some comments here at the end just to make sure. So var item object equals new SN SC cat item. So what we're doing here is we are grabbing the object representation of the catalog item using the cat item ID from the previous step. Now, I will say in a lot of cases, once you have this particular subflow up and running, it's not something you normally have to touch again. So I completely understand and give you full authority to go and just kind of copy paste if that's what helps for now, because the dividends that you're going to reap from this, regardless, are still going to be well worth it in my mind. The next thing that we want to do is look up variable sets. So we're going to say, give me that item object, and then there is a method based on that item object of get variable set, and that'll pass back all the variable sets to us. Those will include the variables as well. So if variable sets length, because this comes across as an array, but if we have any of those variable sets, then we're going to add to our query. We're going to say, okay, that query now needs to include or variable set in. Now, for those of you who don't know what this is a way of doing what they call encoded queries. If you were to go and do a search, and I'll kind of do one real quick. Let's do let's go over to the rhythm table, and I'll show you sort of what it looks like. If you, most people are familiar, if you just want to like right click and show matching. Now behind the scenes, it kind of does an encoded query up here. It's hard to read here, but you can always right click and copy query on your query here. If you paste that somewhere, it's going to say like cat item equals blah, and this thing is your sys ID, your system ID of that particular record. So back over here, we are getting essentially an array of the variables and variable sets as a string. So we're going to say our query includes those variable sets. So it's either part of that item or the variable sets that are in that item. And then all we're going to do here is return the query, because the query needs something in an encoded query format, which this is, to be able to search. All right. So we're going to say if that lookup actually yielded any results, if variables exist, I'm going to say lookup records count greater than 0, then we're going to actually go and create some records here. Because behind the scenes, whether you know it or not, behind the scenes, let me just go into one of these. The records or the variables attached at the SC task level are done so by records on a table called SC items variables task. So let's go back here. And actually what we want to do is a for each. So we go through all of these variables. So any variable found, for each variable found, we will attach/create a new record that will attach the variable to the catalog task. Create record. So as I said earlier, this is the SC items variables task table. It's not one that most people really go look at. SC item variables task. You see it's a variables table here. And there are a couple of things that we want to look at. So there's the variable, and we'll use the variable record, right? And then there is the task. And we're going to pass in our input task, so the SC task record. So create a variable record to attach the variable to our SC task. Let me save this before we forget. And we can run a quick test. We can go back and look at our SC tasks real quick. Find the one that didn't have something, and we can actually run a test against that. So our most recent SC task. So this guy had no variables associated with it. Let's just use it kind of as our test bed before we attach it to our flow. We can test this. We'll pick that as our task record. Run the test. Let it run. We can go look at this. This is kind of the same thing as that flow context. You'll see that it had a lot of variables, found quite a few things. So let's go and refresh this and see if we found what we need. And look at that. So we have variables on this same SC task that we did earlier. So that is dynamically adding variables to our SC task records so that we don't have to anymore. And the beauty of it is that since it is scripted, since it is scripted, it's going to look each and every time and pull any active task records or any active variable records, and add them. So we no longer have to worry about that. So let's go do that. Let's go add this. Create catalog task with variables. Let me make sure I published that. I did. Okay. So here we want to run a subflow. And we're going to run, maybe I didn't publish that. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Publish. We want to attach variables to our catalog task. And then we are going to pass in the task that we just created. I can publish that so that our main flow kind of picks it up. And then we will run it again to see what it looks like. So we're back at our catalog item 2. This is the one that uses the standard item the standard flow under the hood. So we are going to fill out our variables here. Let me just pick a few. And run it. Now remember last time that we ran this, we didn't actually see our deployment location or some of our additional users or really any of the variables there. But let's make sure that we see those now. Okay. So we see them on our variable or on our rhythm record. Good. Let's look at our SC task record, and voila, there we go. Here's the beauty. Let's go add a new variable and run it again. We can add 2, 3, 4, 7 variables if we want to. That's okay. I'm just going to add a couple really quick. Test variable, and then I'm going to add a second one just to have it. So on our form, we can see that we have our test variable 2. Now, our previous iteration of this, if we go back and look at our very original flow, if we wanted to include this, we would now have to go in and say, I want to pull in my new variables, right? So test variable 2. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm actually not going to touch the flow at all in this case, since we're using our standard catalog item flow. It should just work. So let's make sure that it just works. On our new rhythm, obviously we can see our new variables hit the rhythm, so that's good. No corruption there, no issues. Now let's make sure that the task itself is happy. And it is. Nice. So a couple of things we can do. That's one way to kind of make a very, very simple, very dynamic flow that's going to, you can use this on 12, 13, 14, as many as you want, different type of catalog items, and it's just going to pick up the information from your catalog item as well as the variables that you've already made on that item. But the great thing is we can use some of these even in our more non-standard flows, right? So let's go back to our first typical catalog item. So we still had that same issue here where we had a test variable that we added to our flow. Let's say we want to keep the approval here, but we can actually use some of the other pieces that we've built here just to make it easier on ourselves. So I'm going to nix this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out create catalog task with variables. All I'm going to do is pull our requested item variable in, and I'm done with that. I'm also going to add in our wait for all catalog item or catalog tasks complete. Pull our rhythm into this, and then I'm just going to activate and publish. Really, that should be the only change we need now for making this even more dynamic in the future. So if we have business logic outside of our standard flow, we still have these modularized components to use in those cases. So let's go rerun our typical catalog item demo just to show you on the back end here. It is still using its own flow, the flow that we just modified, not the standard item flow. So if I submit this, update, pick some things here, and then submit. Let's go take a look at that on the back end. So we expect the rhythm to pick it up. That's good, that's great. It looks like our task is being generated appropriately. It's to the correct assignment group. It has a correct short description, so we're good there. And it has our variables. So this is now pulling in that default description, our kind of default short description. But the great thing is, since we're using this in a non-standard flow of sorts, we can modify some of that. So we want our short description to be go to thinkdigital.com for awesome resources and ServiceNow information. Oop. And then let's set the, well, we don't really need to set the assignment group, that's fine. I just want to make sure that that piece works so that we can make sure that even in a non-standard flow, we have a way to adjust some things. Rerun that one more time. If everything worked the way that we think that it should, then we should have a go to thanksdigital.com. Great, we're still pulling in our fulfillment group. And then let's look at that description. So now it is even, we have the ability to modify on a per flow basis, even if it's not our standard flow. Now, the way that I've seen clients use this in the past, and actually just had one last week at a fairly large organization, they immediately, upon completion of this standard catalog item flow for them, and it was a little bit different, right? We had a lot more inputs here, a lot more kind of tweaking items. You can add almost anything that you want to. If you want to modify priorities, or if you want to go ahead and add work notes, additional comments, anything like that, you can do it here. This can get as complex or as simple as you want. We've built out a pretty simple one today, but it's just a base for you to build on in the future. But I've seen organizations, like I said, one even last week, that immediately replaced probably 20 or so flows with the idea to replace even more in the future. And that's just reduced technical debt for them. So something to think through there. And that's really what I wanted to show you all today. This is I think it's gone pretty smooth. A way to build out this dynamic flow. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about the behind the scenes of what's happening in terms of variables, and the actual create catalog task itself. So what this is doing behind the scenes is the same thing as what our script is doing. We just have it scripted and don't have to depend on a person to manually move items every single time that we add a variable. This also makes it really useful if you do have users who are not necessarily developers, not necessarily admins. They're not going to be working in the back end necessarily of ServiceNow to create catalog items. If you have users who are instead going to be building out in a catalog builder, this is a really great flow for them, the standard item flow, just as a way to say, hey, use this, make sure your inputs are correct, and everything else will roll smoothly. So that is all I have for us today. Again, I'm Trent from Cigital, technical consultant and developer. I hope this has been helpful. If it has, feel free to reach out and we will be happy to help you with any of your ServiceNow needs. All right, bye.